Hello, people of the internet. This is Kaiju Noir here with a review for Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, also known as Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster was the first film to be directed by Jun Fukuda, a then newcomer to the series, who would go on to direct 4 more Godzilla films in his career. Now, before I get into the actual review, allow me to share you a personal story. The year was 1996. I was 4 years old, and like any kid, my favorite thing in the world were dinosaurs. From Beast Wars to Power Rangers, from Barney to Jurassic Park, I loved anything that involved those mighty prehistoric creatures. Then one day, my parents came home with 2 VHS copies of 2 films for me, both starring that mutant dinosaur that we all know oh so well. At the time, I chose to watch the one whose striking cover featured a fire-breathing reptile fighting an equally massive lobster on an island whose volcano was erupting. After watching Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, I was never the same again and became the Godzilla fanatic that I am now. To this day, that movie remains to have a very special place in my heart. As I grew older and used the internet for kaiju-related research, I noticed how this film seems to either be ignored or hated by monster movie fans. Probably the only reason most fans even know of this film was because it was one of 2 Godzilla films featured on the awesome series Mystery Science Theater 3000. Now I believe the time has come for me to put my opinion of this film into the melting pot that is the internet and shed light on this underrated installment. In the film, a young man named Ryota, played by Toru Watanabe, wants to desperately search for his brother Yata, played by Toru Ibuki, after he was lost at sea. When the search party failed to find him, Ryota travels to a dance competition that offers the winner a boat. After finding out that he was too late to compete, 2 of the failed contestants, named Ichino and Nita, played by Chotaro Togin and Hideo Tsunazuka respectively, offer to show him where the yachts are, where they meet Yoshimura, played by Akira Takarada, the quote-unquote owner of one yacht in particular. Once he allows the trio to sleep in his boat for the night, for some reason, Ryota takes the opportunity to steal the boat with everyone aboard. Eventually, Ryota and the reluctant crew are ambushed by a giant crustacean named Ebirah and are stranded on Lecce Island, where they partake on a crazy adventure involving an evil terrorist organization, slaves kidnapped from Infant Island, and of course, giant monsters. I believe one of the reasons this film doesn't get much love was its departure from the last 2 films, as they were heavily involved in sci-fi elements such as aliens, space travel, and King Ghidorah. In this film, our protagonists spend the majority of this film on a tropical island, and the plot has more of a fantasy-adventure feel, like that of an Indiana Jones film. Personally, I enjoy the setting that the film takes place in, as the characters get to be in an environment where danger can be around every corner, and they must use their wits to rise to the occasion to save not just themselves, but potentially the world. The other complaints I hear about the film are the monsters themselves. One was the sea monster himself, Ebirah. Now, I can understand how coming off of King Ghidorah, this poor guy pales in comparison. Yet, on his own, he makes for a decent opponent. As a kid, I've always thought that lobsters were one of the coolest looking animals, along with crocodiles and octopuses. From their crimson red shells to their signature claws, a lobster makes a great basis for a monster. I felt that the suit was really detailed, and the fact that the fights take place in water allows the special effects crew to hide the suit actor's legs when portraying a very non-humanoid shaped kaiju. The fights between him and Godzilla are really well done, especially considering that it's one of the few fights during this era to take place both in and under water. The giant condor that shows up out of nowhere for a minute is definitely one of the more WTF moments of the Godzilla series. The puppet is very stiff and raggedy, and seems like a last-minute addition. On top of that, the short fight was shot in a very erratic and confusing manner, probably in a failed attempt to hide the puppet's flaws. The filmmakers were probably hoping that audiences would be too busy figuring out what the hell is going on before they noticed the lack of quality of the giant condor. Overall, I think the creature's addition was pointless and should have been removed from the film entirely. Mothra was a monster that stayed mostly in the background as she was asleep until the end of the film, and her presence felt more like a bonus. She looked okay for the most part, though the puppet used to portray her did seem a little worn out. It is interesting to note that in her last appearance, she was in her larval form, while here she's an adult. In her next appearance in Destroy All Monsters, she's in her larval form again. I can only assume that Mothra was her offspring. Finally, we come to Godzilla himself. Many fans have problems with the fact that he doesn't appear until around 50 minutes into the film. While this is a problem that I will get into later, I wasn't bored at all as I was completely invested in the character's trek through Lecce Island. Had this been a traditional G film that had scientists and reporters talking amongst themselves waiting for Godzilla to show up, I would have definitely been bored during this movie. What I found rather odd about the Big G was his behavior in the film. Throughout the film, he acts like a living lumbering storm, destroying everything in his path. However, at one point, he comes across Daio, a native from Infant Island played by Kumi Mizuno, and seems mesmerized by her for a short period of time. This was most likely due to the fact that at one point in the film's production, King Kong was originally going to be the star of the film. This would explain that scene, as well as Godzilla's ability to gain energy from lightning, an ability Kong had in King Kong vs. Godzilla. One last thing I'd like to point out is near the end, where both he and Mothra have a short scuffle. I was really perplexed by this, since Godzilla and Mothra had a truce in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. I guess Godzilla wanted a friendly rematch after losing to her and her twin in Mothra vs. Godzilla. Some of the film's weaker points were the characters themselves. Ichinose and Nita have very interchangeable personalities, and we don't get a lot of characterization out of them. I can't really think of anything to say about them other than that they were good-natured. The same can be applied to both Ryota and Yata, except with them, I can say that they were willing to get themselves into danger head first to save others. The commander and naval officer of the Red Bamboo felt like very generic villains, though it's not every day you find a terrorist organization with a giant monster on their side and a base that looks like a McDonald's play place. The only characters I thought were handled well were Yoshimura and Daio. Yoshimura starts out as a crooked liar and a thief, but gradually changes over the course of the film, and eventually becomes a selfless hero, similar to Han Solo's character arc from the Star Wars trilogy. Daio is successfully played up as a sympathetic character who's been separated from her friends and family, and must now team up with a ragtag group of strangers from another country. I found her character quite compelling, and it doesn't hurt that she's very easy on the eyes. Hey, what can I say, I'm a guy. Finally, we come to the film's uneven pacing. It starts out nice and smooth, but then by the middle it slows down for the human drama. I didn't mind this at first until I noticed that by the time Godzilla shows up, the movie speeds up to Mach 5 as Godzilla takes out all of the villains one by one in a succession, as if he got a star from Super Mario Bros. And was rushing to the end of the level. Until last year, I had only been able to watch the American version on VHS. Now, after watching the original Japanese cut on Sony's DVD, I found several changes, both big and small, between the two versions. The biggest change was the beginning, as the American version replaces the scene with Ryota at the Maritime Safety Office with stock footage of Ryota's crew being attacked by Ebirah, and passing it off for Yata and his crew. Shortly after, at the dance contest, the English dubbing makes Ryota, Ichinose, and Nita sound like they've already known each other, and that the two were trying to get the boat for Ryota's search. One minor change in the American version was Daio speaking in gibberish while she was praying for Mothra, while in the Japanese version, she prayed in silent. Perhaps the most infamous alteration in the American version was the fact that the Red Bamboo, Ebirah, and Lecce Island are never referred to by name, which just baffles the mind. In Miles Imhoff's review of this film on Toho Kingdom, he describes Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster as, quote, a very lazy Sunday afternoon experience, end quote, which perfectly reflects my thoughts. It's not up there with the best of the Godzilla films, but it's definitely nowhere near as bad as some of the series' lower points. It's a decent film that's worth watching, so if you got a thing for monster movies and you've got a couple buddies over who also enjoy entertaining, campy fun, then watch a film that easily deserves a 3 out of 5. 4 if you happen to find the MST3K version, as Joel and the bots can make your movie night even that much more special. So until next time everybody, take care.